Hi film fans, you're watching Craig's Film Reviews. This week we're going to be talking about Kingsman The Golden Circle. So Kingsman The Golden Circle, directed once again like the original film that came out in 2014, Kingsman The Secret Service, was directed by Matthew Vaughn, who's also directed films like Layer Cake, Stardust, Kick-Ass and X-Men First Class before he made the first Kingsman film, and was co-written with Vaughn by Jane Goldman, his regular writing partner as well, so they've written a few films together. So yeah, Kingsman The Secret Service was a pretty successful film, much like Kick-Ass. Well, they're kind of one and the same really. Kick-Ass was Vaughn's version of a comic book movie, but taken to the extremes. So he really pushed the comic book elements of the film, really pushed the foul-mouthed raunchiness and violence of the film and took it to the extreme. And Kingsman was pretty much his attempt to take that idea and put it in the James Bond spy movie genre. And it worked very well. The first film was very funny. The character of Harry Hart, played by Colin Firth, nice to see him playing against type. Usually Colin Firth plays the nice guys, the Mark Darcy kind of characters, doesn't he? And in Kingsman, he kind of played against type by playing an action hero, really, playing James Bond. I mean, I wonder if he'd ever been good as a Bond. He probably would have been quite a good actor to play Bond, but in that one he played more of a got to play up to the humour that he doesn't often get to do very much. So yeah, Colin Firth was probably the standout in that film. Also a bit of a star-making role for Taron Egerton, who's gone on to do films like Legend as well, in the Craze film, The Legend, and Eddie the Eagle is quite good in that as well, playing a bit more of a geekier character in that one. But he's an upcoming actor, and he kind of really shone in the role of Eggsy, who was the a guy from the streets who gets taken into the world of Kingsman and gets turned into a suave, super James Bond style spy. So yeah, it was a very funny film. Very great action scenes, especially one where quite a bloodthirsty scene where Harry Hart, the Colin Firth character, his mind's taken over and he goes on a killing spree in a church full of right-wing Americans really. So very good film, very popular film, reasonable enough success, enough to warrant a sequel. So here we have Kingsman the Golden Circle. So this one, the cast is joined. Colin Firth returns, even though he was killed in the first one, so we'll get back to that in a minute. Taron Egerton returns. Mark Strong returns as Merlin, who's their kind of Q kind of character, the guy who stays in the office and uses all the tech for them. We've got Hannah Alstrom as well. She plays Princess Tilda, who's Taron's girlfriend. She made a brief appearance at the end of the last one, who's now his girlfriend in this one. But they're joined by Pedro Pascal from Game of Thrones mainly and Narcos. He plays a character called Whiskey. We've got Channing Tatum plays Tequila. Halle Berry plays Ginger. We've also got a kind of bizarre cameo from Elton John. The villain this time, Samuel L. Jackson was in the villain in the first one, and this time we've got Julianne Moore playing Poppy Adams. Okay, so the plot this time is the criminal Poppy Adams. She's a drug dealer, one of the biggest drug kingpins in the world, but she's fed up of being a nobody, so she has to live in this South America jungle, and she lives in this almost like a faux American high street, like an old-timey 50s high street, where she lives in a diner, but the diner makes burgers from human meat. So yeah, that's another kind of off-colour joke that's typical of the film. She wants to become famous, so she destroys the Kingsman's HQ in England, and the Kingsmen, all that's left of them, are Eggsy and Merlin, and they find out that there's a sister or brother corporation, a spy organisation in America called the Statesman, and that's run by Jeff Bridges as Champ. He's the guy who runs that, and they meet Channing Tatum and Halle Berry and Pedro Pascal, and they kind of join forces to take down Poppy Adams, who's planning on distributing a deadly form of drugs across the world. So that's the plot on that one. The thing is with the first film, it was the most important, the most kind of memorable aspect of that one is the shock factor, is the fun of watching these kind of a spy movie, a James Bond movie, but with bad language, with lots of gruesome violence, over the top action sequences, and raunchy kind of sexual jokes a lot through it. But the first film had a great story as well. It had this great story about Eggsy, and almost his class comments where he's like thought of as joining this world where he's surrounded by people from more of the upper class, these kind of public school educated guys from rich backgrounds, and he's the guy from the streets from London, and he's kind of looked down upon by them. But the idea of that Harry Hart, Colin Firth's character, sees something in him, a strength that the others don't have. So the whole character arc for that first film was about Eggsy revealing the inner hero within and making something of himself. So it had that background to it, had that underneath the storyline. And this one doesn't really have that as much, I don't think. Eggsy hasn't really got much going on this time round. He's firmly established as a Kingsman. And they kind of give him a bit of a subplot about his girlfriend. So at the ending of the last film, it's the most controversial joke in the end of the last film was the scene where, I don't know whether you've seen the first film, hopefully that you have, that he's rewarded by saving the world with the promise of anal sex by the princess of Sweden or some other country. So, but in this one, and a lot of people found out, a bit beyond the pale, and you can see what they're going for. They was trying to really put the extreme version of the joke at the end of the old James Bond films, like the old Roger Moore ones. I think he's attempting re-entry, sir, that kind of joke, into this kind of new modern age, I suppose. And a lot of people found it a bit off colour, and I think it is, and it was a bit of a old joke that kind of just came out of nowhere in that one. And this one, they've kind of carried on that storyline by he's now in a relationship with Princess Tilda, and it's kind of the tension between him trying to be a Kingsman agent but also trying to be her partner. But it doesn't really give Taron Egerton much to play with. He's pretty much doesn't have much of an arc this time. There's some fun stuff bringing back Harry Hart, because they bring him back and he was killed in the last one with you would have thought it would be a fatal headshot, but he's back. They've rebuilt him, and but the joke is this time he's not quite the capable, unflappable hero he was in the first one. This time he's a little bit off the pace, lost the step a little bit. So there's some nice fun jokes with that, and there's a little bit of dramatic tension there where Eggsy still sees Harry Hart as his hero, as the main man, but now maybe Eggsy's overtaken him. Maybe Harry's not the guy he once was, and so there's some nice tension in between that. The statesman idea, initially it's quite a fun idea. They come into the American, in the original film, the jokes are about Kingsmen they're all named after Arthurian characters. So the head is like King Arthur and Lancelot and Merlin and Galahad. So that's what they're all codenamed for. So the American version, statesman, they're codenamed for different drinks. So you've got Channing Tatum as tequila, Pedro Pascal plays whiskey. We've got ginger is Halle Berry. So and their disguise is a whiskey distillery. So that's some nice kind of nice little fun joke on that one. But if you're going into this film, they've really built up these new characters coming into it, and these big name actors like Jeff Bridges and especially Channing Tatum. But if you're going in expecting to see a lot of them, they're not in it that much. So especially Tatum, he's pretty much a one or two scene cameo. So if you're going into that, you expect to see him a lot. Going to be disappointed. There is one funny bit of physical humour with his where he's been taken over by the drug, and it's kind of a bit of a rip-off of his 22 Jump Street. So it's kind of a joke that he's done before, 21 Jump Street, where the drug makes him do some crazy dance. So it's very funny, but it's a joke that he's done before in another film. So Pedro Pascal is actually probably the most the newcomer that makes the most impact. He's a very charismatic actor. If you've seen him in Game of Thrones and Narcos, he's got a lot of screen presence, and in this film he probably steals the film from most of the other actors. Especially he's the one that makes the most impression out of the new characters, as seemingly like the American version of Harry Hart, but there might be more to him. I don't want to spoil it too much. But yeah, there might be a bit more to his character than meets the eye. Elton John does show up in quite an extended cameo. He's in the film more than Tatum, really. He plays himself. He's been captured by Poppy Adams. It's a bit odd seeing him. The first time you see him, it's quite funny, but they kind of drag the joke out a little bit thin, especially having him in the role, actually involved in the action near the end. So it's a funny joke, but I think it wears a bit thin, which I think is probably sums up most of Kingsman: The Golden Circle. Jokes are very funny when you first hear them, but once people tell them over and over again, they become less and less funny. And I think that's what happens with Kingsman. The original film was a breath of fresh air. It was a real, when you've got the the Daniel Craig James Bond movies getting more and more kind of serious and trying to go for that Jason Bourne style again. And Kingsman was a bit like old school James Bond, but pushed to the extreme. So it was even more comical, even more over the top action and violence, and it was just it has that shock factor, whereas this one doesn't so much. Once we've seen one Kingsman film, the second one they could have taken it in different directions possibly, and it's just a shame that some of the things that might have added some new stuff to it, like focusing on the statesman a bit more, they're kind of just relegated to the background, and really they just the Kingsman again with a little bit of an American accent. They're not much different. The same with the villain. Julianne Moore is very funny in it because she's but again she's the same as Samuel L. Jackson, where they're the villain, but they kind of got this facade of always being jolly and happy. So it's kind of a twist against the normal scowling villain, but it's the same as what Samuel L. Jackson did in the first film. It's not. It's a bit disappointing, I'd have to say. The more I think about it, the more disappointed I was. As you watch it, it's very entertaining. But unlike the first film, you watch it and you kind of forget about it again. I'm not too fussed if I never saw it again. The Kingsman first film has got quite a lot of rewatch value, and I think, again, because it has that story, it's got that story of Eggsy proving himself and having that character arc of going from a kind of a guy who's kind of lived adrift and living this aimless life, and then making something more of himself and becoming a hero. This one doesn't really have that. There are some good things about it. As I said, Pedro Pascal is very good in it. Taron Egerton, I think he's going to be a big star. I think he's shown a bit of range in some of his other roles, like in Legend and in Eddie the Eagle. He's very funny plays a totally different character than he does in Kingsman, playing Eddie the Eagle in that one. So I think he's got a lot. He could have quite a long career. He's got a lot of presence again, and he's a good actor. So I think he's going to go quite far. Colin Firth's good game. He's funny. He's less shocking this time around since we've seen him do it before in the first Kingsman film. So he's still fun to watch him play the action hero. Mark Strong as Merlin. Yeah, he gets a few more moments this time around. He gets a bit more involved in the storyline this time around. So again, he's another great actor. Halle Berry, it's nice to see her around. I haven't seen her much in many big films again. You forget she is still a very good actress. But they don't give her much to do, which unfortunately she's in it. But and we kind of get this feeling that she'd like to go out as a field agent, and there's a bit of the fact that they're all male in this spy world, and which is something that, especially with someone like Jane Goldman, who's a woman who's obviously she has done a lot of stuff about feminism, and she's a lot of her scripts tend to kind of focus on that a little bit, but it's not really featured in this film at all. They could have done a bit more of it, especially some. I don't want to spoil it too much, but some of the female characters of the first film are kind of thrown away quite early, which is a bit of a shame. So they could have done a bit more with that, trying to make it a little bit less of a boys' game, and might have added a bit of a different element to it. Some of the best bits in it, there's a funny recreation of the pub scene from the first film. This time takes place in an American bar, and there's a nice twist where we see Harry's not quite. First I thought, oh no, here we go, we're just going to do the same scene again. But no, there's a nice little twist to it with Harry isn't quite the agent he was once before. So it's a bit more of a kind of slapsticky version of that one, that original scene. But again, the problem with that is that it's the same again, but not quite as good. It's just a reference to the first film and doesn't really do too much new with the new film, so it's a shame. I think Matthew Vaughan's an interesting filmmaker. The thing is with him, his most popular films are the films like Kick-Ass and the Kingsman films, where he does... His style seems to be this kind of impish, like he's trying to shock everyone and really push the kind of comic over-the-top violence and sex jokes and foul language, and take these kind of traditional kind of genres that aren't famous for that and trying to make them in that more shocking and more energetic. And I really like those ones, but I kind of like his other films where he's a bit more strange, like his first film, Layer Cake. Has some problems, but mainly to do for me with the ending of that film. But he actually really like X-Men First Class that he made. It's got problems, I think, because he and Jane Goldman came into the project pretty late and had to rewrite the script pretty quick, and they didn't get to do everything they wanted to do with that film. But I think it's the best X-Men film. It's got the most energy to it. It's got the most humour, and it really feels like a comic book movie. It's really moves with a bit of pace, and it's got some nice acting in that film as well. So I think sometimes these kind of very subversive filmmakers, these kind of more controversial and more ambitious filmmakers, sometimes I do think they do their best work when they're doing these more genre films or doing these more kind of mainstream Hollywood films, because it gives them I think a lot of those kind of filmmakers do kind of implicitly understand the genre and the genre conventions that you have to follow, and they kind of have fun with that. But then they kind of slip in some of their ideas, and it gives a bit more of there's a different energy, a bit of a tension to the film. Like it's almost like this filmmaker trying to get out. So I find those kind of films, I'm trying to think of another example. Like it's a bit like when someone like David Cronenberg does a film like The Fly. Or David Lynch does something more commercial. Some of their best films are where they're subserving themselves to these kind of more commercial genre conventions, but they're sneaking in these like kind of darker ideas and these more kind of challenging ideas without anyone even noticing. So I think Matthew Vaughan's a bit like that. So I'd like to see him do something like that. There's quite a few rumours that he's thinking of doing. He's been in talks to do Man of Steel 2. I think he'd be a pretty good director for it. I don't think he'd try and slip in all his usual raunchy jokes and violence. I don't think that'd be appropriate for Superman, but I think he'd give it a bit of energy, a bit of humour that I think it desperately needs in this new DCU universe. So overall, Kingsman The Golden Circle, it's a fun film, entertaining. If you like the first one, you're going to like this one because it's pretty much the same kind of tone, pretty much the same story, with a bit of an upgrade in terms of the budget and the action a little bit. So if you like the first one, it's a very funny, very fun, entertaining film. But like some of other Vaughan's films, there's not a lot of depth underneath it. I know like that's not what every film needs, but there's not a lot of meat underneath it. And it's unfortunately a bit of a retread. It's telling the joke the second time. A lot of these comedy sequels don't work because it's hard to keep it fresh without totally changing it and losing what people loved about the first film. So it's a challenge. I think overall it's quite good. It's a pretty good film, but I prefer the first film, and this one doesn't add much to it. So I think I'd be surprised if there's another one. They may do another one. Who knows? Maybe Vaughan will like to have another crack at it, but I think it's probably run its course now. So yeah. So let me know what you think about. That's been Craig's Film Reviews, and we'll be talking about Kingsman: The Golden Circle. Let me know what you thought of it. Hit the like button if you like these reviews and you want to hear more. If you have got any comments about it, what you thought of it, put some comments underneath. If you want to subscribe, hit subscribe and hear more of these videos. I am going to be doing, one of my other videos that I do is the podcast that I do for Screaming Into the Void with some of my colleagues Bruce and Harry. We are probably going to be doing a spoiler discussion. This one I've tried to avoid spoilers with Kingsman, The Golden Circle, so just to give us my general first thoughts of the film. But we're going to probably go into a bit more in-depth discussion of that film. So keep an eye out for that one. If you've seen the film and you want to hear some more of our discussion where we go a bit more in-depth into film while giving some spoilers away, listen out for that. So thanks very much, guys.